You're listening to the Better for America podcast, presented by AMAC, the Association of Mature American Citizens.
Hello, everyone. I'm Rebecca Weber. This is your AMAC podcast, Better for America. And today we are going to take a deeper dive into understanding why capitalism is good for America. And we're joined by an amazing American leader, one of the nation's top minds in business, economics, and the importance and power of capitalism. But more, he is a leader with the kind of experience few have. He's someone who has walked the walk, led companies under fire back to success, and has faced market stress and has demonstrated the American values of resilience, perseverance, and personal resolve. And today, his name is Andy Puzder. And he is the former CEO of CKE Restaurants. He has helped turn Hardees and Carl Jr.'s restaurants into globally recognized powerhouses. He expanded these iconic names to 3,800 restaurants total. And today he lectures on the virtues, the difficulties, the rewards of American business and leadership. He is also an attorney and comes from a working class. He is very sought after academic, a senior fellow at Pepperdine, a member of Washington University Law School's Board of Advisors, and a director on the advisory board of Prager University. He recently co-authored Job Creation, How It Really Works and Why Government Doesn't Understand It, as well as The Capitalist Comeback, the Trump Boom, and the Left's Plot to Stop It. Please welcome a leader whose name is widely known and respected, Mr. Andy Puzder. Andy, welcome. Thank you for being with us today.
Thanks for having me, Rebecca. It's a pleasure to be here.
Excellent. Very good. I hope I get everything that I shared, because you have had just such an amazing career. Really, what a journey. And in many ways, I look at you and consider you really the classic American dream. You offer a great source of inspiration in the process. So my first question is, could you share, because I do know that you have a remarkable family past, how did you come to be an attorney, a business leader, a CEO, an author, and a commentator?
I guess the turning point for me was a day when my father, who was a car salesman in the 1950s, his father came to this country from the Austro-Hungarian Empire, but we lived outside of Cleveland, in a little ranch house. And my dad asked me to go with him to deliver a car, which I did to a very rich man. His name was George Humphrey. He lived very close to us, a couple miles away, but it was a different world. I went with him. We pulled up to this huge gate, probably the first gate I ever saw. It just was immense. I don't know how big it actually was. I was 10 years old. It was 1960, but it looked huge. It opened up on this beautiful white house, nicer than any house I think I'd ever seen. Flowers, perfectly manicured lawn, big drive. My dad pulls in, and there's a road that goes along, the drive goes along to the right of the house, and he passes it up. He goes along to the right. I said, Dad, what are you doing? Where are you going? He said, I wanted to see the house. He said, son, that was the guest house. We kept driving. We drove by the stables, right? And the stables were kind of nicer than our ranch house. It was in Hunting Valley, Ohio, and there's a lot of fox hunting and polo field, and I had horses, and it was very well tended. We come to the house. It's this huge mansion. I don't really know how big it was. In my mind, it's like the size of Downton Abbey. But my dad walks up to the front of it, goes to talk to Mr. Humphrey. He and my dad got along well. And I'm looking around. I'm just, just really taken aback. I've never seen anything like I'm looking at. The sun is setting. The fields are there. The horses, the houses. We're walking back to the car, and I asked my dad, I said, Dad, what does Mr. Humphrey do that he can live like this? And my dad looked down and said, son, he's a lawyer, and he runs a company. And I can still remember thinking, like it happened yesterday, a lawyer, I could be a lawyer. I could do this. And I think it's important that I thought that, but I think what's more important is what I didn't think. I didn't think that SOB is stealing from us. He's in the 1% and we're in the whatever percent you're in when your dad was selling cars in the 1960s. What I thought was I could do that. And thank God I lived in a country with an economic system where I could do that. And eventually I did.
That's a wonderful story. It really is. And
Well,
with
thank you.
everything that you have done, yeah, I love that. I love that story. I think that that is how all of us should be thinking, really. How do we get from point A to point B and not be intimidated and not live in fear? Because there really, I believe so much so that if you put your mind to anything and you work hard at it, that you can achieve. And certainly with all that you've done, you've gone to prove that. I want to talk a little bit about your writings about capitalism, because I feel like you're probably one of the best people in leadership today, having led a major international corporation, to speak about this topic. I do want to take a moment, help those listening, if you could, young and old, rich and poor, whether people are Democrat, Republican, or independents, to understand really why we should be worried about the rise of the left in America. Okay, the rise of those really promoting socialism. And if you could just help clarify the vital differences between capitalism and socialism, and why it's so important that we understand those differences.
Let me start by saying one thing that really comes to the forefront, particularly in the recent election in Virginia, was I was told, always told, I could be whatever I wanted to be. So when I found out what Mr. Humphrey was, I wasn't sitting back thinking, my God, I'm an oppressor, or my God, the worst possible thing you could be told is you were a victim, that you really couldn't succeed in the United States because you were a victim. Everybody was going to take advantage of you. I think the left teaching our kids today that they're either oppressors or victims is horrific. And I think it's right that parents rose up against that. For me, capitalism, our free market capitalist system is so far superior to any big government socialist system that I'm really almost befuddled that it becomes an issue in our education system, because it's so obvious. Kids are taught that socialism is benevolent, you're a good person if you're a socialist, and that capitalism is based on greed. But the reality is, and it's a very simple to explain reality, the reality is exactly the opposite. The only way you can succeed in a capitalist country is by meeting the needs of other people. When I ran CKE Restaurants, I didn't think about what kind of burgers I wanted, or corporate elites wanted, or government elites. I thought, what kind of burgers you wanted? Everybody who's watching this show, when you are going, if you're going to succeed in a capitalist economy, you have to meet those needs, the needs of your customers. I mean, think about the grocery store, thousands and thousands of products that are screaming on the shelves to try and convince you that they have what you want at a price you can afford. And if you can convince people that you have what they want at a price they can afford, you'll be very successful. So that's not clearly charitable motives. It's not like your Mother Teresa, but you are out there trying to meet other people's needs as a way to improve your life, to take advantage of your own efforts. That's really a lot closer to benevolence than it is to greed. Now think about a socialist system. In a socialist system, it's just the opposite, right? Consumers don't control the economy. In a capitalist free market economy, it's consumers who are determining who succeeds and who fails, which is why entrepreneurs, business people, have to meet their needs. In a socialist economy, it's the government elites who determine, where the economy goes, what goods are produced, how much is produced, what you can buy, where you can buy it. So you're really stuck trying to compete with everybody else in the economy for whatever goods or services the government decides to make available. So let's say you're standing in line for food. Everybody who's my age, I'm 71, will remember the bread lines in the Soviet Union, but they still have them in Cuba, Venezuela, and North Korea. If you're standing in a line for food or for medical care or for gas, you're not thinking about what the person in front of you or behind you wants. You're thinking about how you can get the most for yourself when you get to the end of that line. So you're not out that terrific energy that's generated when everybody's trying to meet the needs of other people as a way to succeed. That energy is lost. People are now competing with each other to see how much they can get from what the government gives. And how do you do that? Well, in a socialist economy, you do that by meeting the needs of the government elites. They control the economy. So you're not trying to meet consumers' needs. You're trying to meet the needs of the government elites. And of course, the government elites do very well. North Korea, people are starving, right? The soldiers are starving. The kids are starving. Everybody's starving. But Kim Jong-un, I don't know if you've seen a picture of him lately, but it doesn't look like he's missed any meals. This is the kind of result you end up with in these socialist economies. A very privileged elite class that's very powerful, and consumers, regular people like the rest of us, maybe living more equally, but it's equally in our poverty because we never really get the chance to achieve and succeed.
Thank you. That is really so important, and so important that we recognize that government does not really create or build anything. It's
No.
not the government that does that for people, and things don't miraculously appear out of nowhere. So I think that it's really about people putting their trust and their faith in themselves, in people, or in government. And it seems really strangely odd that our youth are being brainwashed, as you said. It's befuddling. And the only answer, in my view, is that they certainly are looking to fundamentally change America. And this is the one way that they're doing that. More power to government. If it's those people in government that are looking to make these changes, are they truly doing it to serve themselves over the people, or do they look at America and do they really just not love the greatness of America? The fact that people are still coming to America today to achieve the American dream. What do you think is in the minds of these extreme leftists? And we're seeing more of them today. It doesn't seem that they're so extreme. They're more common in government. But even someone like our President Biden seems to have really forgotten the greatness of America and is looking to really create an entitlement state in America. What do you think is the driver of that? Is it in fact power and greed?
Well, it is definitely power. These people are very, very hungry for power. You should always be suspicious of somebody like Bernie Sanders. Let's take Senator Sanders for a moment. He's
Sure.
out there saying, we need to increase the taxes on people. We need them to pay more. We need them to give more to the government, and we'll determine how that government's distributed. And by the way, I want you to make me the head of that government. You should be very suspicious of people who tell you they want you to give all of your money to something. And they will determine how to distribute it, and they want you to put them in charge of it. This is Sanders. This is AOC. This is the Democrats. Joe Biden was out there. He said during the election, we can't say we were fooled. He said, I see the pandemic as an opportunity to fundamentally transform the American economy. It's important to think about that. President Trump viewed the pandemic as a problem. He addressed it by coming up with therapeutics and encouraging industry to come up with vaccines to address the problem. Joe Biden saw the pandemic as an opportunity to fundamentally transform America. So this is two different approaches to how you run a country, to how you serve your nation. President Trump wanted solutions. President Biden, and it's very obvious that he's doing exactly what he said he would do. He's fundamentally transforming America into a third world country. I mean, our foreign policy is terrible. We don't have any borders to the south. We effectively have open borders. Our foreign policy is ridiculous. The world is laughing at us. The Chinese openly laugh at Joe Biden and ridicule him. His position on the Democrats' position on defunding the police and on teaching critical race theory. If you think about it, this is a good question for your viewers, and I hope they ask other people. I've been asking, and I've never gotten a good answer. If the Democrats and Joe Biden were trying to screw up the country, I'm not saying they are, but let's say if they were trying to screw up the country, what would they do differently than they're doing today? I mean, rationally, there really isn't a lot they could do. I mean, you could say, well, they could declare war on China, or they could do something ridiculous. But leaving the ridiculous things out, what else could they do to try and mess things up? I really can't think of anything.
Oh, that's sadly true. But this is really so important that you're really helping us to understand why we have to preserve our free markets and limit government control and protect individual liberties. So your explanation is really about how we preserve the American dream. And I think that we've got to reverse our policies. I think Trump was doing so much good for the country,
Yes.
and good for our future generations. I do want to just walk back a minute to talk a little bit about education. We spoke about education. How do we take control of our educational system again? How do we find way? I guess that's part one. And then part two to the question is, how do we help young Americans not be really enamored about socialism, because they do seem to be in some ways almost enamored. So education first. How do we control our educational system again?
Well, I think we have to start at the lower grades. We have to start kindergarten through 12th grade. The colleges are going to be very, very difficult to turn unless we turn younger people first. And I think in this last election, you saw some very positive signs. I think we had something like 57 school board positions open, and 44 of them went to people that were fighting critical race theory. Well, you wonder why critical race theory was being taught to kids at school. Why was this being taught in the first place? Why were there school boards that promoted that? It's because the teachers' unions contribute tremendous amounts of money to elect left-wing progressive candidates to your school boards, your kids' school boards or your grandkids' school boards, to try and get these people on those school boards to encourage this progressive leftist teaching. So I think we saw some real progress by these school board elections where conservatives, or at least concerned parents, they didn't even have to be conservatives, just concerned parents got up and ran for school boards. We have to take power away from the teachers' unions. They are incredibly powerful politically. And the way we do that, and they know it, is charter schools, homeschooling, anything we can do to try and encourage, to try and take the monopoly of education away from the public institutions. That, there's only been one thing in the history of the world, one thing ever, that's increased quality and decreased price, and that's competition, the heart of the free enterprise system. We need competition in education. And then you'll see some of these schools start to turn around, because when they're competing for students, when these teachers know their jobs depend on students wanting to go to their schools, you're going to see a real turnaround in the school systems. Before we do that, without that competition, without parents standing up, without charter schools and homeschooling and the other means of reducing the power of the teachers' unions, this is going to go on and on. So I think we saw good results in this election that happened last week, and we need to continue that.
Yeah, sometimes things do have to get worse before they get better. And it may be
Yes.
really a blessing in disguise what we saw occur in Virginia, because we did see the parents really step up and they said, no, that's, enough is enough. And unfortunately, in this world, we're seeing, the left really push what I call cancel culture, right? Because everyone who has an opinion that doesn't align with their ideology is canceled. And really,
Right.
they're trying to erase so many big parts of the American dream. So this is, I do pray for a turning point, and I agree. Competition is what will really get these schools to start thinking. If those students begin to parents put their students in other places, what will happen? I think there's only one, the solution will be, we've got to make our customers happy. In this case, their students and the parents. I wanted to shift a quick minute to it's one of the most heartening, really hopeful and educational aspects, Andy, of what you've written has really been to point out that our founding fathers believed in our founding documents, the Declaration of Independence. They believed in free markets, and they really had it right, in my opinion, because they put us on a trajectory where we could achieve upward mobility, upward prosperity. And so I want to ask for you to take a moment and talk a little bit about how this great country came to being so great, how the principles of freedom, including political, economical freedoms, limited government, were a real springboard to everything that we enjoy today, and how our founding fathers really breathed those beliefs into our documents.
Well, 1776 was obviously a very crucial year for the country and for the world. First of all, it was the United States saying, look, we're going to be a country that's based on God-given rights, the rights that are enumerated in the Declaration of Independence, the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And Adam Smith came out with his book called The Wealth of Nations, which described how you set up a free market capitalist economy and why you'd want to set one up, because it would make the nation that did so very prosperous. Between 1889, when our Constitution was ratified, and 1885, we went from being 13 backwoods colonies on the coast of North America to being the world's largest economy. 100 years, the blink of an eye historically. And we went from nothing to something. We went from, a country that could barely fend off the British to a country that actually had an economy that surpassed the British Empire at that point in time. So you can see the results of this, the energy that's generated by free markets. And you can see that result in the United States, but you can also see it in Western Europe, which surged economically at the end of World War II with the fall, not only of the monarchies that fell in World War I and World War II, but also the collapse of the National Socialist Party, which I assume most people on this call actually had an education. If you talk to your kids or grandkids, you're going to find out that they don't know the National Socialist Party was actually the Nazi Party. You could look at Japan, once MacArthur went in and put in and established a democracy and a free market economy in Japan, Japan soared to the point where its economy outgrew that of Western Europe for the first time in history. Eastern Europe surges after the fall of Russia, of the Soviet Union. China surges once it adopted red capitalism. It's not even real capitalism. It's this red capitalism that they pretend it involves aspects of the free markets. And even then, they've been lifted, people have been massively lifted out of poverty. So the capitalist economic system, I will quote Barack Obama speaking at George Washington University in 2015. There's no dispute that the capitalist economic system has created more wealth than any economic system in history and has lifted billions of people out of poverty. This is what kids need to be taught. If the lessons are very simple, that our system is so superior to any other economic system, particularly socialist or collectivist systems. It's so easy to explain, but they've done a great job of concealing the evidence, concealing the facts, and trying to divert the attention of our youth to something other than prosperity and freedom. And we need to put an end to that. And I think, as I said, parents are doing that. You can do that when you vote, vote for people that support these alternatives to public schools. And I think we'll get our country back on track, but it isn't going to happen tomorrow. We need to get moving. And we've got elections coming up in 2022 and 2024. And boy, we better get out and vote, because if we don't, we could lose this country.
That's right. Yeah. And you've been so persuasive also at making the point that Martin Luther King believed that we should reward people based on the content of our character, not the color of our skin. And now today, people look at Martin Luther King as if he's like an old fashioned person, and that his beliefs in the American dream are being thrown away. And they're being thrown away. The left is calling it woke capitalism, right? Rewarding people not for hard work, dedication, and good ideas and their character, but for random physical reasons, for political reasons. And isn't it something how the youth, and I don't mean to paint a broad stroke here. I know that we've got a lot of young conservatives, and I pray that they will be the fabric that holds this nation together. But it's this idea that people think that it's wrong to recognize the greatness in America, as if it's wrong to want to win, as if it's wrong to want to dream of that gorgeous home. When you stood in that yard and you looked at this, setting sky behind the bed, you saw a promise of what somebody could make for a future for themselves. And those things people are being taught that that's wrong to think that way. So it seems to me that the way the schools are really failing is they're not teaching our children how to think. They're teaching our children what to think. And that is not what schools should be doing. We should be encouraging our youth to explore and think hard. Look at the history as you've laid out over that 100-year period. My goodness, it's wonderful that you're reminding us of that, because that is a short period of time for us to get so far. There are people who are likely listening, and they might say, yeah, we agree, we like capitalism, it's good, free enterprise is good, but what about all those millionaires, multimillionaires, billionaires? Isn't it unfair that certain people struggle and other people can make millions, even billions of dollars here in America? What do you say to that? Because there are some folks, what they're saying all over the news, that the richest of the rich are not paying their fair share. And I think to average people could say, well, are they, aren't they? They're believing what they're hearing. So for all those uber wealthy people out there and those millionaires and billionaires, how do you respond to those thoughts that people might have about it being unfair?
Well, let's start with these people making a tremendous amount of money. As you know, Elon Musk, Steve Jobs, Jeff Bezos, Henry Ford, they didn't make a tremendous amount of money by stealing from us, as would happen in a big government socialist economy. They benefited tremendously individually because they benefited us tremendously. Think everybody's driven a car. What did Henry Ford do? Well, he didn't try and make cars for kings and queens and government elites. He tried to make cars for the common man and the common woman. He was very successful. People could afford cars. It transformed not only our country, but the world. And he was tremendously successful because he did that. Jeff Bezos developed the most incredible distribution system in the history of the world. There's no country, no corporation, no individual that's ever come up with anything like Amazon. Thank God he did it before the pandemic. Where would we have been without Amazon? Not to mention, the spin-offs like Uber Eats and Grubhub and Instacart for groceries. This is an incredible concept, and he was made tremendously wealthy. But all of us got tremendous benefits. Steve Jobs, he didn't make the iPhone for kings and queens either. He made the iPhone for you and me. And just think about all of the benefits, a tremendous uplifting of our lives from having these smartphones. You carry around more information in your hand than you used to be able to absorb at the largest of public libraries. You can communicate with anybody in the world. I mean, it's amazing the things you can do on that iPhone. Do I care that Steve Jobs maybe made 50 cents per iPhone? No, I don't care. I'm glad that the world got to benefit from what he did. We got tremendous societal benefits, tremendous economic benefits, because these people, and these are all American companies, by the way. Elon Musk left South Africa to come to the United States. There's a reason that these companies almost always come out of the United States. It's our free market capitalist economy. And if people are telling you that the rich people, that the top 1% aren't paying their fair share, they're simply lying to you. The top 1% of Americans pay about 40% of all income taxes. They make about 20% of all income. So they're paying really double. If they were paying their fair share, you would think they would pay like 20%. If they earn 20%, seemed to be fair to me that they pay 20% of the income. In fact, they pay 40%, and we have the most progressive tax system in the world, which means rich people pay more, poor people pay less. So we already have a tremendously unbalanced tax system, but it's fine. The rich are happy to pay their 40% with their 20% of income. This is not what you're being told. This is what the IRS tells us. These are the numbers that come out annually. And I'll tell you something else. After the Trump tax cuts, right? The rich were paying 40% of all income taxes. Before the Trump tax cuts, when the tax rate for the wealthy was higher, they paid 37% of all taxes. Wow. In fact, if you Art Laffer's Laffer curve, I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but what basically says is that if tax rates are zero, we get zero tax revenue. If tax rates are 100%, we get zero tax revenue because nobody's going to want to earn any. Why would you earn any money if you're paying 100% of it to the government? So some point between 0 and 100 is where you get the maximum. You collect the maximum amount of tax revenue. And the fact of the matter is that it's about where we are now. And in fact, it got better when we lowered taxes slightly. From Obama had increased them, we lowered them back down. Ronald Reagan had the same experience. He lowered tax rates, and rich people paid a lot more tax because rich people can control their income. So a lot of what we're being told is just false. Rich people benefit us tremendously, and they benefit tremendously, and they are paying their fair share. So it's just not true. There's no guarantee these people are going to succeed. Henry Ford went bankrupt twice before he had the Ford Motor Company. If you look at Jeff Bezos and Steve Jobs, keep in mind, they're both adopted, right? And they started Amazon and Apple in their adopted parents' garages with money they got from their adopted parents. There was no guarantee these guys were going to be successful. You take a risk when you go into business. And if you succeed, if you benefit other people, if you meet your consumers' needs, you will benefit tremendously. But that applies also to pizza parlor. The guy in your pizza parlor in your neighborhood, he only succeeds if he meets your needs. So this is across the board. An incredible economic system generates tremendous energy, tremendous success, and tremendous benefits for everybody.
Yeah, that is such a great point. We've got to remind ourselves of that. I mean, my father was a real entrepreneur, and he was a businessman. He had a great mind, and he loved ideas and loved to keep busy. He was very unusual in that, he had this real vitality, and every time he fell, he got right back up again. And that was what he enjoyed so much about creating and building. And as a young girl growing up, watching my father sort of under his wing, I saw how hard things were for him. My father passed away 18 months ago. He worked for Allstate, and he saw that he was making Allstate a lot of money. He said, I think I can do this. I think enough people like me, and I can sell life insurance and auto insurance and do it on my own. And when I was 10 years old, quick story, when I was 10 years old, My father, it was 1980. This was the year he decided that he would break away. It was a tough time in America, and banks didn't want to loan him money, that kind of a thing. And he gathered the five kids. My youngest brother was 5 years old at the time, and the oldest was 12. Five of us, my mother was home raising us, one car, what it was like back in the 70s and
Yep.
80s, different world, as you said. And my father said to me, this Christmas, Santa Claus has a few reindeer that are unable to pull the sleigh, so he's got to get a much smaller sled. But Rudolph will still be definitely delivering gifts, but not all of the others. Some of them, I think it was Donner who was sick, and Blitzen. And he said, so there's going to be fewer gifts under the tree, but we'll pray that the reindeer heal, and we'll remember why we're celebrating Christmas after all. And that Christmas, we never noticed that we got two gifts instead of five or something like that. But boy, I saw him. I saw how he worked. I saw how hard he worked. I watched him walk in the door at 11 o'clock at night. I knew how much it killed him to have to leave his kids on weekends to go work. And it took, 15 years for him to really build something so that he and my mother, his wife of over 50 years, could finally retire, only for him to start AMAC, Andy. Dan Weber was the one who said,
All right.
you ought to start something to compete against AARP. But that's just the whole thing. It was just an idea. And we've done so much good, AMAC, that is. If Dan Weber hadn't said, let's start this alternative to AARP, then there wouldn't be us in Washington, D.C. today really fighting on the issues to help make America great, and really to better the lives of all Americans, but especially those 50 and older. So while AARP is looking to expand, healthcare, a federal takeover of healthcare, and they're endorsing all of these crazy policies, AMAC is here to protect and preserve your interests. So again, just to brag a little bit about my own father, I apologize, but it's a wonderful story.
Right.
And I just want to encourage people to go out there. If you have a dream, you're never too old. Dan Weber was 65 when he thought of the idea to form AMAC. We're 2.4 million members today. So for people listening, if you have that dream, go ahead and pursue it. We're going to work hard to make sure that the federal government stays out of your business and is only there in the ways that we vote government in office, and that is to protect us and make sure that things are done on the up and up. But do you understand exactly what woke capitalism means, really? I don't.
Yeah, there are some elements to it. One thing is for example, when Nike uses Colin Kaepernick in an ad, that's supposed to be a big woke thing. Nike's a woke company. Well, when Nike talked about the ad, they didn't come out and say, we did a Colin Kaepernick ad, we're losing money, but we're really good guys. They came out and said, we did the Colin Kaepernick ad and we made a lot of money. That's really not woke capitalism. That's just plain old capitalism. You do an ad that appeals to your target market and you get rewards for it. Coke tried that. They implemented something against the Georgia voting law. They put in some critical race theory HR program for their employees, which the employees went nuts about. Well, that didn't work so well for Coke because Coke doesn't have a market like Starbucks or Patagonia or Nike that's really kind of progressive, younger, that a Colin Kaepernick kind of thing would appeal to. When Coke tried to look woke, they got slammed. There's a report came out from Rasmussen, a poll saying 37% of Americans were less likely to buy Coke products. Well, I'd sure like to have been at that Coke board of directors meeting when the CEO informed all the directors that 37% of America was less likely to buy their products. So they backed off. That's really not woke. That's just sort of trying to make a profit. The Business Roundtable, it's kind of the same thing. They've said, we're not going to focus on shareholders and profits. We're going to focus on customers, employees, supply chain, and our community. That's the new stakeholders. Well, what idiot CEO doesn't focus on his customers? Of course you focus on your customers. Your employees are your most valuable asset. Like, who wouldn't focus on them? If you don't focus on your supply chain, well, your supply chain isn't going to supply you. You're going to go through something like the pandemic. They're going to give all the supplies to somebody else. And everybody knows you need to be liked in your community. So I really don't, I think that all of that was designed to address what's called ESG investing. Because you've got these huge investment firms. You've got BlackRock, Vanguard State Street, that are run by these far leftists. Larry Fink, who's the CEO of BlackRock, is really a progressive crusader. He's out there trying to manipulate businesses to change the environment by 2050. He even sounded like Joe Biden. He said, we all need to be aware that to change the economy, the American business model has to substantially change if we're going to get carbon neutrality by 2050. Well, I don't remember voting for Larry Fink to fundamentally transform the economy or to enact these policies. We elect politicians to do that. So we're getting pressure from these large investment funds that own a lot of stock in these companies. BlackRock, it manages $9 trillion in investments from state pension funds, including red state pension funds, not just blue state pension funds. And they are the first, second, or third largest shareholder in 80% of the companies listed on the S&P 500. So we've seen, just like we've seen the left penetrate our education establishments, they penetrated and took over the media, they've penetrated and overtaken the entertainment industry. They're now trying to do the same thing with respect to the business community. So I've been making a real effort to put up some opposition to this ESG investing trend and to make sure people understand exactly what BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard are doing. Because quite honestly, they're doing it with your money. If you're in a pension fund, if you have retirement income, I guarantee you that pension fund has some money invested, if not a lot of money invested, with BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street, and these other investment funds that are using your money to pursue things that are not in your economic interest and not consistent with your ideals. So this is a big problem.
Wow, thank you for that. I have two more questions before we let you go, and thank you. You've been so generous with your time. Real quickly, explain to folks listening, why is it bad for the federal government to mandate a minimum wage well above that which many companies are not paying, especially to those young, 16, 17-year-olds that are looking for part-time work, while going to school, going to college. Why are you someone who feels that would be not a good thing for America business and America economy?
When the wages will go up when the economy grows. Under President Trump, we had 20 straight months of 3% plus wage growth, which we didn't have 1 month of 3% plus wage growth following the Great Recession under President Obama. But we had 20 straight months under President Trump because he got the economy going again. And we saw median family income hit the highest level it's ever hit, and the poverty rate hit the lowest level it's ever hit, and income inequality declined for 2 years in a row. This is going into the pandemic. So you can't lift wages organically. When you try and impose a minimum wage that's above what businesses can afford to pay under the economic circumstances they're facing, then they look for other things to do. They look for ways not to have employees. I mean, they look for, in the burger industry, they've got machines where you can order your food instead of going to the counter. They've now got machines that actually make these food products, so you need less employees. Businesses will cut back on the number of employees. They'll increase hours of existing employees. Anything not to bring on more employees if you raise the minimum wage too high. Now, right now, the minimum wage is a joke. I mean, nobody anywhere in the country is making $7.25 an hour. I mean, if you drive by any fast food restaurant, I was in Michigan this summer, northern Michigan, and McDonald's was advertising $21 an hour to start. This is for high school kids, could make $21 an hour. I'm in Nashville now. You can't hire people for less than $12, $13, $14, $15 an hour. So we're seeing, with a shortage of workers and an economy trying to recover, we're seeing wages go up. That's a little bit artificial because the pandemic is really suppressing people from joining the labor force. And there's so much, the government has spent so much money discouraging people from working that you're seeing kind of an artificial impact on the labor market. But if you increase the minimum wage beyond what businesses can pay, they'll either go out of business or they'll find ways to avoid paying labor. And then you kill entry-level jobs, which if you can't get on the ladder of success, then you can't succeed. So I started at Baskin Robbins for $1 an hour, and I'm still proud of having that job.
That's right. Thank you. No, that's really good. And it really is that simple. It makes a whole heck of a lot of sense to me. I do want one last question I have for you. Boy, We're seeing our national debt explode, and we're seeing all of the excessive spending. Uh, how concerned should Americans be about our increasing national debt? And what does this mean for the future? In your opinion, what do you think we should be doing that perhaps we're not doing? What do we have to look forward to in our lifetimes? But even I worry about my children, my grandchildren. I'd love your thoughts on the national debt here.
Yeah, we should be extremely concerned. The money supply, the amount of money that's out there that the Fed, they call it printing. I don't know if they actually print it anymore. I think it might be like an online transaction, but they have increased our money supply by a third since the pandemic began. We have 33% more money in circulation now than we had at the beginning of the pandemic. And everybody knows the more you have of something, the more there is of something, the less it's worth. So what we're doing is we're driving inflation. We're also driving inflation with all this government spending that encourages people not to work. That has two impacts. One is it messes up the supply chains because people can't manufacture goods because they're not working. They can't unload the boats. They can't drive the trucks to deliver goods. So you've got a shortage of goods. And with all this money going to people, you're seeing demand increase. Everybody's got a bunch of money. We're still about $400 billion more in savings, even though there's been less people working for the past 18, 20 months. We're way above the savings that people had going into the pandemic, and they went in during pretty good economic times. So there's tremendous demand, limited supply, too much money. The price of everything's going to go up. And when that happens, interest rates go up. And when interest rates go up, it becomes harder for everybody to borrow. It becomes harder for the country to borrow. It becomes harder for individuals to borrow. The economy declines, prosperity declines. I can't, it's just insane what they're doing right now. Even Larry Summers, who was the Secretary of Secretary of the Treasury under Clinton and Chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors for President Obama, has been screaming since March, stop the spending. It's not just me and Art Laffer and Steve Moore and Steve Forbes, it's stop the spending. And if you don't, we're going to end up with hyperinflation. A lot of people watching this will recall the early 1980s under President Carter, where we had double-digit inflation and double-digit interest rates. And it was a very, very difficult time, and we're going to end up back there. Plus, our kids are going to have to pay this money off, and our grandkids and our great-grandkids. We just can't keep spending to meet our needs today and foist that bill on on future generations. It's not fair. It's not the way any of us were raised, and it's not the right thing to do.
Thank you. You're just such a wonderful spokesperson for freedoms of all kind. I want to thank you so much for giving us this wonderful time and allowing us to hear your insights. I do want to wrap up with just putting a picture of your books, your most recent books. Tell us about these books a little bit. And when was your last book published?
I had two broadsides out. One came out the summer of 2020. One came out in the spring of 2020 about how America needed to get back to work and how the Democrats were going to try and use this pandemic to transform the economy. We shouldn't let them. So they were prophetic a little bit in that sense. My book, The Capitalist Comeback, was 2018. It was called The Capitalist Comeback, the Trump Boom and the Left's Plot to Stop It. And boy, they sure stopped it. I mean, we're heading, we were heading straight up economically. We're heading straight down now. But it's a book that has a lot of history in it, a lot of tying these progressive goals to how they damaged our economy and how they damage our economic freedom and our political liberty. So I would encourage people to read it and to get their kids to read it and their grandkids to read it. I think that's been the one comment I've gotten on the Capitalist Comeback is they wish people would use this in schools. And I wish they would too, because I think there's a lot in there that could really help kids see what's actually going on in the country.
Oh, that's great. With more and more folks that are homeschooling, I think parents ought to get their hands on that book, because that is really great to give you a really good sense of things and have those deeper conversations with your children. Knowledge is power. So
yes.
This is great. Andy, thank you so much. You're an inspiration. Your life experience is so deep and broad and remarkable. And you've really given us a gift today, and you're learning your own life lessons, sharing them with us. And so we're so grateful for you. And here at AMAC, I mean, we know that we have so much to be grateful for, and that really gives us a sense of hope for the future. So thank you so much. And from
Well,
all of those listening, we thank you.
Rebecca, thank you. It's been a pleasure to be here, and thank you for the kind words.
Excellent. Very good. All righty, folks. So thanks so much for tuning in today. I want to thank all of you listening for tuning in. And if you haven't downloaded the AMAC News app, you can track and you can catch all kinds of breaking news right there on the AMAC News app. Doesn't cost $1, doesn't cost a cent. And you don't even have to give us your email address. Go ahead to your iPhone, your smartphone, and search AMAC for the AMAC News app. You'll get original content that you won't find anywhere else. Please like, listen, and share this podcast with friends and family. And please hit the subscribe button so that we can send you a notification each time one of these is released. Appreciate everybody being with us today. Thank you for joining. I'm Rebecca Weber. This is your AMAC podcast, Better for America. God bless you all and have a great day, everybody.
Thank you for listening to the Better for America podcast. To learn more about AMAC and all it has to offer, visit us at www.amac.us.